Well, welcome to What's Broken. For my next project, nothing's really broken, but I'm going to take these bed frames, do a little bit of disassembly to all of them, and I don't know how well this shows up, but this is my rough blueprint on something I'm going to build. So basically I'm just taking the little mini grinder and grinding off a whole bunch of the rivets. So basically that's what I'll spend the next half hour or so doing, just grinding the rivets off, and I'll be left with a whole bunch of very usable weldable angle iron. I read somewhere where this stuff's made out of old railway rails. I don't know if that's true or not, but it certainly comes in handy for lots of little projects. Okay, so that only took a mere second in video time, but I ended up, I took apart all the bed frame, ended up with a bunch of 1¼ by 1¼ angle iron. I think there's some 1½ by 1¼ I did save a few of the brackets, or the end pieces, they may come in handy. And these 4 pieces here on the end, I need 4 legs that are just under 32 inches. And it just so happens that these are 31 5/8, so some of my work's already done for me. I'll cut some of these pieces up to what I need for size, and then start tack welding it together. I do have to swing by Princess Auto and pick up some air parts, regulators and speed control valve and ram and hose and whatnot, so I'll go get that done and then we'll be back here at the shop. Okay, so I've carved up some of the pieces. These 4 will be for the table. Just going to start tacking things into place. Those magnetic welding squares or angle units definitely come in handy. Just going to put a few tacks on. I'll weld everything up after I've got it sort of tacked together. In theory, this should be square. 24 1/8. 24 1/16. That's pretty close. Well, that looks good and square. I'll throw some tacks on here. Just pulled a little, so I'm going to just clamp it in. Watch your eyes. Well, let's flip it over and see what it looks like. Everything's nice and flush. Yeah. Might have racked a little from the heat pushing and pulling. So I might have to put it in the vise and just give it a little bit of tweaking. I think I got the racking out of it. Just twisted it in the vise a little bit. When you weld, where you weld, it heats and then contracts, and it can pull stuff a little bit out of shape. So when building things like a table, it can become a little more important to keep an eye on. So this table, it's upside down right now. I'm just going to put a couple supports this way and then I think 2 that way to provide a little bit more support for when the air ram comes down to hold the shoe in place. So I'll just do a few tacks and welds and get this part done. Just move you out of the way for a bit, or over here. Now I'm going to just put these 2 cross supports in place. got the bracing tacked in place or welded in place. I'll shave these off with a grinder afterwards. Then I'm going to let it completely cool down to touch, and hopefully that will limit the amount of warping that takes place. Well, it's been clamped and held in place and everything's cooled down. Let's see if it racked or not. Nope. Perfect. So I think I'll clamp it down a little bit again, weld up these tops, and I'm going to smooth them off after with a flapper disc, and then I can put the uprights in place, put the horizontal support for the air ram, and then probably tack some legs on it. Okay, it's all clamped down, so I'm just going to run some welds across the top here, finish it off. And again, I'm going to let these cool right off before I release the clamps. Keep everything in plane. And then I'm going to weld the angle iron together for the uprights. Well, while I'm waiting for that frame to cool down a bit, this is going to be the top horizontal and the air ram's going to sit on top. Turns out that this washer fits over the end of the air ram, and I'll be able to drill the bolt pattern out. So I want to mark out, I just want a little more reinforcement for the ram on top. It'll be 8 3/16 for center. I'm going to need to carve out a hole in the angle iron so the ram drops through. Just take a minute and take my cutting wheel, put these in the vise and cut out those two center parts. I'll spare you the noise and the dust. Be right back. Okay, I carved out the two half holes in the angle iron. And then I'll set this on top, tack weld it in place, drill the 4 holes where needed, and we will have the mounting bracket situation for the air ram. Let's see if this springs when I release it. Oh, Looking good so far. Yeah, it's all good. To make the two uprights for the sides, I'm going to tack weld two of these together as a channel. I'll figure out a way to clamp this in place, and the two angle iron are clamped together. Everything's smooth and tight and flush, so I'm going to just do some stitch welds. Well, you get the point. I'll finish this one off, do the other one, and then bring you back when I start clamping them and putting them in place to make the up and downs. And the whole key when doing something like this, especially on light metal, is clamp it, weld it, and then let it cool off completely, and it shouldn't spring too much. I've got the uprights somewhat clamped into place. Nothing's tack welded yet. So it's pretty close square, so I'm going to get a tack down in this corner and then square it up whichever ways it's got to go. That's pretty square, so I'll get a tack on the back side. That's pretty much bang on that. Couple of final checks here. Just get them back into shape with a couple of clamps. Get these out of the way. And last but not least, I'm going to tack this. I won't weld it solid until I've drilled out the holes. Okay, to mark out the four mounting holes, I'll try that. Traced out the pattern, cut some holes. This angle iron can be a little tricky to drill. Some places drill easy, other ones will burn the end right off your bit, so best to drill slow. Okay, I'm drilling at a fairly slow RPM. Probably won't be bad getting through the washer, but it'll be the tail will be told when I hit the bed frame angle iron. Yeah, I'm into you can see the separation, I'm into the angle iron a little bit. So I'll punch these 4 holes and then bring you back. No point in you watching me go around in circles. Okay, well I got the 4 holes drilled. I did go through a couple of bits. One caught and kind of split itself into about nine pieces and went flying. So just keep that in mind if you're working on this kind of stuff. And looking at it from the bottom, all the holes are going to line up with for the mounting bolts. This is going to sit on top when it's all done. So now I'll finish welding the perimeter, and I might put a couple of straps over each end. Given that this is such high carbon steel and so hard, these little welds are prone to cracking. There's not going to be a lot of load on this. It's going to be, when the ram goes down, it's going to push up a bit. So I just want to secure it to make sure that if things do crack, they won't go far. I'm just going to tack on some, I don't know what you want to call it, support braces, additional reinforcement for the angle iron to the upright. Might take a little persuading. I'll just pull them in tight with a pair of vice grips and tack weld it in place. Yeah, so if any of the welds do crack and let loose, that helps hold it in place. I'll buzz up that other side, and then I think I'll also just cut a couple of small gussets, which will weld into place at the bottom on each side for a bit of stability, and again, in case any of the welds crack. This is just mild steel, so it tends to bond a little bit easier to this angle iron and sort of helps things out. So this is going to be the plate that the control for raising and lowering the ram gets bolted to. I'm just going to tack it up. So the ram mount's in place, the control mount, little additional support straps or gussets on each side. I think it's time to start building the legs. I got the front legs clamped and squared, so I'm just going to tack them into place, and then I'll tack on the back legs. Okay, I got the back legs clamped in place, everything measured and squared on the one side. Okay, I think I might have missed out filming the welding of the cross supports underneath for the shelf, but they're in. Now I'm just going to sort of go around and get some more weld in all the key places. The next step will be to take a wire wheel to it and just knock all the slag off and the spatter, and then put some paint on it, and then I can start installing the ram, hooking up the controls, the air, and see how it works. So yeah, it's about 11.8 inches, which is what the specs say. So next what I have to figure out is, I got this coupler I bought, and it's going to attach to the rod that extends down to the shoe, or the shoe form. So this is going to have a rod attached to which this will be welded, and then this fits into the different shoe forms. And I'm going to want it to stop 2 inches above the table, actually 2 3/4, because I need to account for a layer of wood. So I didn't have a full chunk of 3/4 ply, and given this is just a working surface, I carved up a few pieces. Just going to reinforce it with a chunk underneath. Lots of glue. These screws are a tad long, but I'll knock off the excess with a cutting wheel after. Again, I don't have any shorter ones, so this is what it gets. That should hold it. Yeah, and I'll just knock those off with the cutting wheel, and then probably paint this shelf and the lower one silver, because that's what I have. So the push rod, or the rod that'll go between the ram and the shoe form, I think I'm going to cut this off about there, carve a channel out so the 5/8 will fit in. That'll give me lots to weld to. So if I take it right to the top, from that shoe form key or whatever, that's 18.5 inches. And the foam pad that the shoe will push into is going to be 4 inches thick. And we want this to go down to about 2 inches into it. So I'm going to shut the camera off right now and do some calculations to see what the rod length needs to be. Now for where the rod goes into the top of this little shoe key or form key, I'd like to drill in, I don't know, maybe a 1/2 inch, give or take, 3/8, 1/2 inch with a 5/8 bit. So I'm going to run a pilot hole in. That'll just give a little more stability on the bottom end. Just got to try to eyeball this straight. Yeah, maybe just a hair more. See if this 5/8 will cut. It's fairly soft metal, so I'm glad it isn't hardened. Yeah, that's 3/8 of an inch, which should be enough to give it a little anchor at the bottom. So I got the rod cut. Should fit nicely, and then I'll put a weld around the outside. For now I'm going to take my grinder and cut this off right at the, I'm going to leave an inch. Yeah, so I'll cut this about 1/3 of the hole and then start cutting up inwards so that I can fit the this rod in, and that'll give me lots to weld to. Well, this is going to take a few minutes, so I'll shut the camera off and bring you back once I've got it sort of carved up to what I'm looking for. Okay, so I got that carved out. This will fit up into there. The tricky part's going to be to make sure this is in line with this, because I do want to put a cross piece with a bushing setup just to stabilize it a little bit. So I came up with a different idea. I got this 1/2-inch plate underneath. I spaced it out with 4 1/4-inch bolts, clamped it down so everything's held in plane this way, and then I've got a straight edge which I measured to keep it straight this way. So I think that's probably as close as I can get it, you know, working in the backyard. It ain't rocket science, so this should work. I put a couple more clamps on, put the ground on the rod side, not on the air ram side. In theory, everything should be in plain and in plum and in peach. Get a couple of, I'm going to do a tack here, and then one on top in fairly quick succession to hopefully hold it all in place. But before I do that, I think I'll put a little bit of masking tape on this ram just to keep any spatter from sticking to it. It might catch fire, but that's better than marring up the ram. There we go, I'll let that cool in place. Then set it back in the unit and sort of check that it stayed nice and square to itself. In order to make up a little bushing, sort of a stabilizer guide, I picked up a couple bushings from Princess Auto that are 5/8 by I think 7/8. And I happened to find a piece of it's actually the handle piece of the pipe that was the handle on a hydraulic jack. So I'll tack weld that, tack the bushings onto the end of it, and then put a strap across the back, and that will be that'll be the guide, sort of a stabilizer guide for this rod going up and down. Okay, so I got the 2 bushings in the end of the piece of pipe slid onto the shaft, put a pair of vice grips on against the vise just to hold everything together, put the ground clamp on it, and give it a few tacks. I'm going to try to keep most of the heat on the pipe side and then just blend it over onto the bushings a little bit, because the bushings are probably quite a bit thinner than the pipe. I'll clean those up in the grinder a bit and maybe see if they need another tack. But they should hold it just fine. Let that cool off. Okay, so to make the bracket to hold the rod bushing in place, I just took a little chunk of 1/8 by 1 inch flat iron, drilled a couple 1/4-inch holes. I've centered the bushing, squared it up. Now I'm just going to tack it into place and then carry on with the rest. Just burning off a little bit of the cutting oil I used to ream it out. And the next step, I'll cut a piece of flat iron to go across here and then fit the bushing into place. So I've got the bushing mount with the holes drilled. This support brace is still loose. I just clamped it to the support brace, holding it up with a pair of vice grips right now. I did get some of this material from a guy many years ago. It's for if you're gonna, solder in a house. I don't know how good a shape it's still in. So if you're soldering near wood, you don't catch the wood on fire. But this seems to have deteriorated with age. Anyway, I'm just going to put it there so when I weld on the sides, I don't get any spatter up onto that main ram. A bit of a measurement here. About 1 5/8 inches. I'll throw a tack on and then let it cool and see how everything still slides. Maybe back you up out of harm's way. Well, I think that's it for the welding. I need to drill a couple of holes, and I'll probably over drill them out to, these are quarters, so probably drill them to 5/16 or whatever, just to give a little bit of, so there's some movement or play. There's one. Get the second one in. I'm going to make these holes a little bigger so I can, so that there's some adjustment if needed on that little guide bushing. So I drilled out made the holes a little bigger. And I'm using these large heads, so I'll put those on the back where the hole's a little larger. Using lock nuts, or nylocks, whatever you want to call them. Well, that should work. And the last thing is to weld this little shoe. Actually, I've been calling these shoe forms, and they're actually called a last, according to my cobbler buddy. I don't know if I mentioned, this is for him. He runs a nice little Joe's Shoe Repair in Calgary. Does excellent work, and he's been gluing the soles on, and then he sort of hammers it on over a last, or what I call a shoe form, to make the glue adhere. And he's been talking about one of these shoe presses or sole presses, and they run about $2,000 and up. So I got looking and went, I think I can probably play around and just build one, which I have. So we'll hopefully get some footage of it working. So I'll just get this squared up so it's in the right sort of orientation, and then weld it. 5 3/4, 5 3/4. I'll let that cool, see if it pulled out of shape anywhere, and if it holds. Here's a frontal view or whatever. And this is actually supposed to point to the back, but given that this swivels 360, it won't matter. I'll bring it back after I get a good weld. Okay, well, I think all the welding and bolting is done. I'm going to touch it up with a little bit of paint where there's still bare metal, some of the welds I did. And then while that's drying, I'll try to not get too much paint on myself while I hook up the controls and the airline. So probably to save the camera, I'll shut it off for a bit and bring it back when I start putting on the airlines and controls. Okay, well, the paint's drying. I'll start putting this stuff on. Just got a couple of those quick connect swivel elbows coming out. This will be the up down. I was only able to fit one air silencer in. I might have to see if I can get a lower profile one. And we've got the pressure regulator so he can set the pressure he wants. Get that dust boot back into place. Tighten these up. So yeah, the hoses are going to come out here to feed the air ram. And up on the air ram, I put these, what do they call them, like air speed regulators. So that'll control how fast the ram goes up and down, rather than just slamming open and closed or up and down with full pressure. It'll regulate that and slow it down. So hopefully you don't get your fingers caught in anywhere you shouldn't. So I ran some air through it, and when I pushed the handle down, this bottom outlet is the down one. So that just gets pushed into there, and I fit it into the top one. I'll show you that in a minute. And that fits into there. So those are connected. I connected it here and up there. Now we'll just do a little test. Well, here's the big test to see if it works. And I'll crank in the speed regulator at the top, see how that works. So that slowed it down, and we'll crank in the bottom one, which is the exhaust for the ram to move down. Nice and slow. Well, I'm going to call that a success for now. We'll get it over to his shop and maybe try it out on a real shoe and see how it works. Okay, so we're here at Joe's Shoe Repair with proprietors Chris and Shimmy in Calgary, just doing the test on it. And then you can just put it to neutral to hold it. Does it look like it'll work?
It will work just fine. Perfect.
Cool. Alright, well, we'll maybe catch you guys on the next video. Not sure what it'll be yet. Bye for now.